Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Transfigured. I'm here with Tripp and Hank, and this is not a Church Father series. Today, we're going to talk about Christian nationalism, what it is, why the people who support it are silly, and why the people who are against it are also silly, and what maybe is the right idea instead. And I feel like I haven't been super caught up in the Christian nationalism debates or conversations, but I know that Twitter has been taking that subject pretty seriously for the last couple months. And so I think that we'll set the record straight by having a good historical perspective on the relationship between Christianity and politics for the last couple thousand years. And also, you know, we're all Americans. We all love America. We want the best for our country. And so we should talk about what that means. And two of us have even been elected politicians in Illinois, which means that you shouldn't trust anything that we say. I am currently serving as a Cook County politician. I have a certificate of election from the Cook County Board of Elections, which, you know, I only had to pay a couple $1,000s to get. It was really not so bad. That's a joke, for the record. And Hank, what was your service in public office? What positions did you hold?
4 years as a park district commissioner, and then 4 years as a township supervisor. So a township of about 100,000 people. So that was fun. And then Kate, my lovely wife, said, "Do you want to be happy or do you want to be a politician?" And best decision I ever made was to get out of politics. It's a miserable career to have. No one's ever happy.
It's probably true.
No one.
So, yep. Tripp, I think you maybe know the most. What in the world is Christian nationalism, and who are the different people, and like what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, you ask each side, and you're going to get a completely different description, and it's going to be a Mott and Bailey. We talked about this a little bit offline. It's going to be a Mott and Bailey on both sides. So they're both going to.
Do you want to explain what a Mott and Bailey is?
Yeah, so a Mott and Bailey, it's kind of like it's a rhetorical trick that people play. It's kind of like a bait and switch. It's maybe a subset of bait and switch. So it's named after the old medieval fortification of a Mott and a Bailey. So the Mott would be a very defensible position that you could kind of retreat to and really is unassailable whenever, you know, an invading army would come in. And then the Bailey would be kind of the surrounding area that's not nearly as easily defended, like a valley where your farmland would be and that kind of stuff. So if a large army came in, you have no hope of holding that ground. So you retreat to the Mott and they kind of take the Bailey. And then whenever they leave, you go back out and you occupy the Bailey again, as soon as they kind of realize that they can't take the Mott. And so in an argument, what this would be is you stake out a position whenever I ask you, like, what is this thing? Or, you know, what is it that you're arguing for? You stake out a position that's almost unassailable, that no one would argue against. But then practically, you're going to use that to occupy much more space than what you just described. And so this in this particular context, what you would say is, you know, you might say, well, Christian nationalism is really, you know, if you're against Christian nationalism, you might say, well, Christian nationalism is about making a theocracy of the United States government. It's about like enacting, based on the Bible, we're going to enact laws and enforce what the Bible says on everyone at all times. And we're essentially going to make Old Testament law or something like that to do it. So we're essentially talking about a theocracy. Other religions might even be illegal in this framework, and that's kind of stuff, or at least like pushed underground. And we're gonna give Christians kind of a privileged place as the citizenry and in society. So that might be
even religious tests for office, and
exactly
state funding for churches and other
in
things.
Some I think in like 7 states there are actually still in the Constitution, you have to believe in the Almighty in order to hold elected office. Now that's not enforced because it's clearly, it would clearly get knocked down by the United States Supreme Court, but it's still in some state constitutions. So if you were
would it? Because the United States Constitution says there shall be no religious test for office at the federal level. I don't think that they say that I don't think it applies to. I think states could still technically have their own religious test.
Well, I think that I think that was originally the idea. However, what they're saying, I mean, I think now what they're saying is that any right enshrined in the United States Constitution cannot be abrogated by the states, even the state constitution. So the state could not make a law saying slavery is fine. They can't make a law saying, they can't add to their constitution.
You must profess to the Westminster Catechism of Faith.
Right, yeah. Or even like they couldn't abrogate free speech and those kind of things. Like that would get struck down by the Supreme Court because basically they're saying any right enshrined in the United States Constitution is not the prerogative. In the same way that Illinois cannot ban guns. Right, even if they abridge their state.
Oh, we'll try.
Oh, you'll try, and it'll get
and it failed.
Well,
numerous times.
It failed, right? Yeah, exactly. So I think that like the original idea was probably that this is the federal government can't do this, but the states had a lot more leniency. I think that ever since that in the last century that kind of went away. So anyway, so that would be like the Mott. That's kind of an unassailable position. Almost no one would argue that we should have a theocracy or those kind of things. Almost no one. Now, the Bailey to that side of the argument, the much more expansive version of it, after they say, well, why are you against Christian nationalism? What is it? And they say, well, it's this. And you're like, okay, well, we're against that. The Bailey is, okay, any public official that's a Christian should not enact laws that they believe that is based on their Christian faith. So if they believe, as a Christian, for instance, if you believe that abortion is wrong, you should not be making laws based on that line of reasoning. That's not okay. And so that's the Bailey. That's the much more expansive. That essentially you're saying if you're supporting a law because you're a Christian, you shouldn't do that either. Right now, we're not talking about theocracy exactly. We're talking about something else. So that would be like the Mott and Bailey on one side. The Mott and Bailey on the other side is, well, I want a nation that supports Christian principles and ethics and values, and that supports the common good. Like you use that kind of language, right? And that's the Mott. Almost no one will be like, yeah, okay, that seems rather innocuous.
Right. I want to keep "In God We Trust" on our money. I want to keep "One Nation Under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Fine, right? Those kind of things, right? I think that's fine.
And we should keep playing the battle hymn of the Republic at government functions and stuff like that. These things have a
place
Christian.
Your hand on the Bible whenever you're sworn in. These kind of things, right? So these are things that there's going to be some people again. They're going to say, no, all that's got to go. But most people are like, yeah, that's fine. There's not a big problem with that. The Bailey, you will get some people that make that much more expansive. So now that they're saying it's not just that, but it needs to be specifically a Protestant one. It needs to be. That's essentially what Stephen Wolfe would argue, right? There's some people that would say, okay, we need to restrict immigration from some country like Mexico that is largely not Protestant. We need to do more than just good laws that are based on our Christian values. It's more specifically, it needs to be this almost like white Anglo-Saxon Protestant version of it. And then we are actually going to maybe start pushing some things out of the public sphere. I won't mention the name, but actually there's a writer that I really like. But essentially that's what he was arguing, is that, basically it should not be okay to make to have public celebrations of religions that are not Christian and those kind of things. So that's the Bailey that some of these guys. So in both sides, you have the almost unassailable position, and then you have the much more expansive version of it. And that's essentially where the battleground is everyone saying, you're saying this, but you really mean this. And that's why we can't ever have a real definitional argument about it. Because of that. Sorry, I took a long time to say that, but I hope
that's helpful.
No, actually, it's been helpful. But the beautiful thing about Twitter is that you can find people are stupid, okay? And they will tell you they're stupid if you just pay attention enough. So our buddy Stephen Wolfe, okay, who I have nothing but, I call him Wolfe the Greater, okay, because there's William Wolfe, who's Wolfe the Lesser. But here's something he tweeted out. I am not conservative because I agree in part with critical methodology of the left, but come to different conclusions and valuations. So one of the things I noticed with whether it's someone like Wolfe, the Wolfe brothers, Joel Webbin, and others, is they have become Gnostic. They have become the right's version, if you want to use it, of the woke left and the progressive Christians. They're both using critical race theory. And as a matter of fact, the funny thing, another thing I found from Mr. Wolfe, the Greater, is he does not like the idea of people marrying cross-culturally.
Right.
Okay, he does not like that at all.
There are elements of it that do start to dovetail with like white Christian nationalism, right?
Correct.
And so then it starts getting, now you have these nuts that they're saying one thing, but really if you just let them talk enough, they end up going in these other very nasty directions. That I think that we would all say, no, that's not what I signed up for.
And they eat their own, by the way, because Doug Wilson comes out and goes, I don't like this.
I don't like that. Yeah.
I don't like this. That's not good. Okay. And all of a sudden they're going after Doug Wilson. And This is not a shot at Tripp, but not all Calvinists are Christian nationalists, but it seems like all Christian nationalists of this brand are Calvinists. Okay.
Well, Doug Wilson, he's a Baptist. No, isn't William Wolfe a Baptist too? I think he's a Baptist.
No, I think there's some variety of Presbyterian.
Yes. Wolfe's a Presbyterian.
And Doug Wilson is some variety of Presbyterian, but James White.
No, William Wolfe on his thing, like
no, William Wolfe is a Reformed Baptist.
Yeah, he's a Baptist. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So what you have is a lot of muddling, okay? Because everybody's going to say, I'm not this. But what they're actually going to do is do what they're not saying they are.
Yeah.
And so you'll hear guys like Russel Moore saying, I'm not a Christian nationalist, but even, Paul Vanderklay goes, yeah, but you look like a Christian imperialist to me. Okay. And they are Christian nationalists. It's just.
And wasn't one of Russel Moore's big books, Onward, engaging the culture without losing the gospel? Okay, so Russel Moore, you have a book called Onward, which is like a reference to onward Christian soldiers. Yeah. And you're encouraging Christians to engage the culture, to help shape the culture, to have more of a Christian value system, presumably, that could then have downstream effects on politics. So you want Christians to re-engage with their values in a way that ripples down to democracy. So like that is a form of Christian nationalism.
But here's the thing. Heaven forbid this now this is going to be my issue with Protestantism, right? It's, well, if you read the Bible, you'll come to all these conclusions. And so when Russel Moore does this and Tripp or Hank comes to a different conclusion, you're not reading the Bible right. Well, I mean, I'm not. Okay. Pray tell. And so all of a sudden you get these fights. And what happens is it's clear to me that the Russel Moore of 10 years ago is not the Russel Moore of today. Okay. And honestly, as a guy who's read a lot of great political thinkers, he's a horrible political thinker, but he ain't a very, very good theologian either. Okay.
I agree.
And so so Russel Moore is more of that man on the left. Okay. Phil Vischer is I call him the Joker, because the guy hasn't had an intelligent thought in 30 years. And
I don't know. Some of those VeggieTales songs that are actually pretty good were written in the last 30 years.
My daughter, who's now a strong Catholic, said we were abusing her when we showed her VeggieTales. Okay.
Actually, I honestly think VeggieTales is kind of pretty good. Some of those songs are really pretty genius, but just because you're good at writing,
there's two things that I believe are
Christian
heresy:
songs.
praise music and VeggieTales. But the issue is that you have they play word games, right? And Tripp's right; it's a Mott and Bailey, and the guy they all hate is not even a Christian; he's an atheist, and that's James Lindsay. I hate when I have to go to an atheist to get better theology than from the Christian right or the Christian left.
Mm-hmm. Did they hate James Lindsay because he's sort of pro-classical liberalism or something like that?
Correct. Yeah, he believes that both sides are basically they are basically saying we need to get rid of the Enlightenment. As a matter of fact, the Christian nationalists are far more very honest about this. They hate the Enlightenment. People are, they want it gone. They want it gone. And of course, in the Catholic Church, you have Taylor Marshall, who's a Catholic integralist, saying, yeah, we should have it gone and have a king who's answerable to the Pope. And of course, you got all the Catholic bishops going, Taylor Marshall can go away. We've tried this thing. That doesn't work. And it's funny, all the stuff that all these gentlemen are saying have been tried over history. When I was on Facebook and I made that funny thing about atheism and Protestantism, a former Anglican bishop came on and we were going back and forth. But he goes, yeah, didn't they kick Calvin out of Geneva? I go, indeed they did. And it's been bad ever since. He goes, indeed it has. Calvin tried to bring a Christian city or a nation to Geneva, and what happened? Okay, it doesn't work.
Well, and in a way,
Geneva,
that's why
the reform.
I mean, it kind of worked for like a minute, and then it didn't work. But to your point earlier, the reform. It does seem like this appeals to the Reformed Protestants very much, this Christian nationalism thing, which makes some sense because this is very much like derived from what Calvin kind of saw as the perfect polity, right? The city that we're going to build and what we're going to implement, for sure. But I guess let's take a step back and just historically talk about what it has been like in the various periods of the last couple thousand years. And you guys have been doing the Church Fathers, so let's start early. What was the relationship between the church and the state in those early periods? You guys would know that period better than I. I can talk more intelligently around like medieval period.
Hank will agree with me. The biggest Christian nationalist who ever lived was Eusebius of Caesarea. He's the great church historian who wrote the history of the church. That's one of the most influential and important history documents that we have of the early church. And he was also sort of a right-hand man of Constantine. And he wrote, books like The Praise of Constantine or Orations to Constantine that were basically putting Constantine's arrival on the scene on a par with Jesus's coming in terms of its historical theological importance.
You notice I have Constantine in my background.
Yes,
this is Constantine. I took it in the Apostolic Palace. This is in the tunnel of St. Peter's. Yeah, so
perfectly appropriate. But
yeah.
I guess I should say in the ante-Nicene period, most of Christianity had a very negative view of politics, and that they were something like, I won't say Christian anarchists because that will make certain of our friends too happy if I admit that they're right on that. But I will say that they were kind of like the Amish or something like that, in that they believed in non-participation in politics. And to the extent that it was legally possible, you couldn't serve in the military and you probably shouldn't serve in any official government post. both because the government itself was like kind of violent, and also probably because you had to participate in pagan ritual sacrifices and stuff like that if you were a high-ranking government official, and that would be, you know, incompatible with warnings against idolatry. And so Christians were very pacifistic, seemingly kept to themselves, and tried to avoid political entanglement as much as possible. And that was also mixed with an eschatology that viewed the Antichrist as likely being a Roman emperor. They were very premillennialist in a way that is kind of similar to American premillennialists, in that they were always looking for the Antichrist and the end of the world, and it was going to be a political figure, probably a Roman emperor. And so that was sort of mixed with their political philosophy. But all of that took a huge 180-degree turn with Constantine.
And you had two early church fathers who wrote to emperors, Justin Martyr and Athenagoras. Both basically, the thing that they wanted to make clear to the Roman emperor: we're good citizens. We're not here to do anything to you at all. Okay?
Yeah.
Just let us do what we're doing, and you go ahead and do what you're doing.
But Christians did pay taxes, and they weren't insurrectionists. That's another important thing.
Yeah, so that's what they meant by good citizens. We follow your laws, and we pay our taxes.
And we're not going to lead a revolt.
Yeah, but once
because various Jewish factions constantly led
revolt. They got mixed up with the Jewish factions that led to the temple being destroyed in AD 70. So the Romans viewed them with a lot of suspicion. Oh, now you're coming to Rome, and you're coming to Athens, and you're coming that place. They're like, that's the last thing we need is another Jerusalem in the middle of Rome, right?
Yeah, but once Constantine comes on the scene with Eusebius, right? All of a sudden, the bishops become a bit more political.
A bit.
What?
A bit.
Trying to be nice, okay?
Like Constantine literally banished Athanasius to Germany because Athanasius had been threatening to withhold the grain shipments out of Egypt to Arian parts of the empire. And so that only pro-Athanasian parts of the empire would get grain shipments from Egypt. And Egypt was the main food exporter in the Roman Empire, which would be threatening Arian regions of the empire with starvation. And this is only a couple decades after Nicaea that a Christian bishop has the power to do something like that. And Constantine banished him for doing that. But
so let's go. Go with history, right? So on the East, what you really have is the emperor throughout the Byzantine Empire has the power over the bishops. Where in the Latin West, things change, especially when the Pope basically named Charlemagne as the Christian emperor, that the church had the power over the Christian kings. And so for quite a long time with the schism of the East, the emperor there is basically, if Tripp's in Alexandria and not doing what he wants, you're gone, okay? Whereas in the West, if Tripp's the Pope and Hank's the king of Germany, and Germans always screw up, hey, you're gone. So, basically that lasted until the Reformation.
But we should, and to add a couple things to that, the coronation ceremonies became Christian religious ceremonies. Yeah. And so started not with Constantine, because Constantine was coronated before Christianity was officially the religion. But I think ever after Constantine, all the emperors had a Christian coronation ceremony. And it was an explicitly religious ceremony, and all of those sorts of things, and it was a Christian nation.
Yeah, well, but then there's an ancient idea that even predates, Christianity, where there is that kind of like this unification of of being a king or an emperor and divinity. Right. Yes. That's very much like an Egyptian idea. Even the Persians had this idea, this idea of the identity of the head of the nation being somehow divine. Either himself was literally divine, or at least appointed by God or
or anointed with a divine spirit. Or
yes,
something
exactly, something like that. And so, like you had with Christianity, now that we have these bishops and we have this church institution that's separate from the state, you still have this impulse to want to unite them in some way. And so in the West, where the Pope essentially had the power, he gets to pick, right? He gets to say, like, do you get to be the king or do you not get to be the king? And so you had this unification of the coronation and ceremony with the religion. It becomes a religious ceremony. And for a long time, if the Pope excommunicated you, that basically gave not just permission, but almost an instruction for you to be deposed by anyone who had the power that was near you, right? That's why the whole thing with Henry and the excommunication, that's essentially what the Pope was doing by excommunicating, was telling Spain and everyone else, go get this guy out of here, right? Or the people within the other English lords, like, get rid of this guy. He needs to go.
And so, England would have been better off if they had done it.
Probably, yeah.
But
that's a weird counterfactual history.
Yeah, it is.
In which
that's what I'm here for.
The English
and I'm doing a
Reformation
multivariate
doesn't
analysis right now.
But there were it wasn't like it was completely Protestant after Henry VIII. There was the whole Mary Queen of Scots, and like that whole period is super messy, and I can't even remember all the details, but it went back and forth a bunch of times.
Very messy, very bloody, and everyone was very scared about who's going to inherit. Are they going to be Catholic? Right. Are they going to be Protestant? And those kind of things. But even
the Protestants. Even the Protestants in England still imagined that it would be a Christian country. It would just be a Protestant Christian country.
A Protestant
they weren't secular liberals or anything.
Well, I mean, let's be clear. We just saw a coronation of a king in England, which was a very religious ceremony.
Oh, yeah.
He even got anointed with a divine spirit. So, like, they're still doing that.
They took on the title the Defender of the Faith, which, by the way, the Pope gave to the King of England.
Yes.
Right. He gave to actually Henry.
Yes, and Henry also liked to use that as a snub. That he did, like, even after I'm Protestant, remember, I'm the defender of the faith. You gave that to me. I'm
exactly. I'm not giving it back. But
that was
even back to like Charlemagne and those kind of things. Right. So like once he's crowned, like, the king of the Holy Roman Empire, even though not really Roman Empire anymore, but now he's the kind of the emperor. And he starts taking over like the Gaulish regions up in Germany and those kind of things. He starts forcing Christianity onto people. He whenever he conquers them, it's bad. Get baptized or die. Like, people are being baptized by the thousands in rivers in Germany because Charlemagne conquers them.
What a great revival!
And that was totally acceptable to the church. Like, the Pope didn't have a problem with this. No one had a problem with this. You see the same thing in England with Alfred the Great. Whenever he starts taking over and fighting back against the Danes, same thing. It's, I've beaten you in battle now. You're going to become a Christian or you're going to lose your head. And that's going to be the thing. And here's the weird thing about the ethic of even the people that were conquered. And I'm not arguing for this, but I'm saying they didn't expect any different.
Yeah.
Like, there was this kind of sense, and again, this goes back to ancient times, that like if you in the name of your God beat me in the name of my God, then maybe your God is bigger than my God.
The outcome of the battle reveals the nature of the divine.
We see this in the Old Testament with Nebuchadnezzar. Right? You are going to worship me. And
or Elijah with the prophets of Baal, like, I won, now you're going to die, right? Constantine, in this sign conquer. You can see, those kind of things. Like, this is very much an idea.
What did George W. Bush want to do with Iraq? He wanted them to change their. Yeah. He wanted them to become Protestant.
Yeah,
and then he was shocked when a country that didn't understand any of the prerequisites of the beliefs that we have in the West said, hard pass.
Right. Do you know, though, in 1900 that Iraq was actually still majority Christian? About a little over 100 years ago, Iraq was majority Christian, but it was Assyrian Christian. I mean, it was Nestorian, basically, not Protestant. But, because of the Ottoman Empire and a whole bunch of things, the Christians kept having to leave.
Which means they didn't understand our form of Christian nationalism. Let's be clear. George W. Bush was a Christian imperialist and nationalist. Okay. And what we find is because you don't understand the history of the world and what's going on, you just think we could overlay this. Okay.
Right.
And now we have the United States, which is a pluralistic country. And let's be clear, I mean, I'm a mutt. My dad's family, my grandfather was from Germany. My grandmother was from Czechoslovakia. My grandmother was from Sicily on my mom's side. My grandfather was from Ireland. Okay. There's a lot of differences in culture, isn't there? Right? Sicily, Catholic. My grandfather was Catholic. My grandmother was Catholic. Only my grandfather on my mom's side was Orange Irish. And so we had to come to some way that we could all work together. And it was the Enlightenment values that the United States then put in the Constitution. And the idea was that we're and it worked out in not the cleanest fashion, we're going to have freedom to worship. But it's going to be a soft Christian nation. What I mean by soft is what John Adams said, is that we need to be a moral people, or this ain't going to work.
These sets of laws and this form of government were designed for a religious and moral people, and without that, they wouldn't work.
And there would be broad agreement amongst Catholic, Anglicans, Methodists, Baptists, what moral looked like.
Right.
Without arguing about papacy or baptism or any of the other
transubstantiation or predestination. We're not going to argue. We can't argue about predestination in the Constitution of the United States, but in general, even the Methodists and the Quakers and the Baptists and everybody have a general set of shared Christian inheritance.
And this kind of détente wasn't primarily it wasn't like an exegesis from the Bible or anything else like that. It was a lesson practically that we learned by seeing all the violence that happened in like the Huguenots and the Catholics and the English and the Anglicans and the Catholics there and everything else. We're just like, we can't do this. We're going to all kill each other if we keep doing this, and we need a better way forward. Right. And that's where go ahead.
I have a little history lesson that I think is, of course, you'll understand why I want to tell this history lesson, but I think that it's very, very easy to argue that the relation that liberalism is intimately tied up with Unitarianism, and that to make this I'm not kidding. So when in the early days after the Reformation, there was a small minority, but a pretty vocal minority of Unitarians. And it wasn't just Michael Servetus. There was also the Sozzini family in northern Italy that were winning converts to Unitarianism. And for a while, even some northern Italian cities looked like they might break Protestant in a Unitarian direction. But eventually those Unitarians in northern Italy, and this is like the mid to late 1500s, so pretty early on in the Reformation, they got kicked out by the Catholics. And like sort of the leftovers of the Servetus Unitarians and the Italian Unitarians moved to Poland. And there were some princes in Poland that were very sympathetic to Unitarianism. And the Unitarians, I think mainly because they were persecuted by Trinitarians and sort of the lessons of Michael Servetus, were the first people to propose the idea that there should be freedom of individual religious conscience that is instituted at the state level, and that people should get to make up their minds and go to their own churches. Because previously there was the idea of whatever the prince was or whatever the king was in your kingdom, that was the official religion. And maybe there could be some religious minorities like Jews or some other Christian sects. But
you tolerate them. They're not,
you tolerate them, and maybe they are restricted from certain privileges, or maybe they have to pay extra taxes and they probably can't become officials in the government or things like that. But in Poland, it was the first time from about 1560 to about 1650, there was about a 100-year liberal period in Poland where the Unitarians were in charge, but they were like anti-in charge. right? They had influence over the government, but they allowed it to be liberal. And so there was Calvinists and Unitarians and Catholics and stuff like that. There was no official state religion, and there was freedom of choice for individual conscience. And this was like the first time in Western history. Maybe you can find some precedents that would be similar in ancient Greece or something like that. But this is the first time in Christian history that there was something like that. And then what happened is that Sweden invaded Poland, and the most of the countryside in Poland was still Catholic. The Unitarians were mainly in a couple big urban centers and were connected with sort of the elite in government. And so like the rural Catholic population was nervous that their Protestant urbanites would betray them to the Lutheran Swedes. And so they sort of overthrew the Unitarians and made Poland Catholic again. And the Unitarians then fled to the Netherlands and to the United Kingdom. And one of the people most influenced by these Polish Unitarian refugees was John Locke. And John Locke was basically kind of theologically raised by those Unitarian refugees from Poland. And his political philosophy was basically taken from a lot of those ideas in their experience. And that's sort of the liberalism that then hopped across the ocean. And it was funny, I was listening to Stephen Wolfe and Doug Wilson talk. I think I made it to 50 minutes before I was just cringing too much that I had to listen to something else. But they were talking about, oh yeah, and the founders were Christian. Well, a couple of them were heterodox, but like, we're just going to skip over that fact. But it's like, what do you mean a couple of them? Like the first 6 presidents of the United States were Unitarian. And like a majority of the people who wrote the Constitution were Unitarian. Like Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin. And what's interesting is you can actually see the different kind of directions that Unitarianism would go. There was the Thomas Jefferson, like anti-supernaturalist deist kind of Unitarian who didn't really believe in the authority of Scripture or anything, and Jesus is just a human, miracles don't happen. There was Benjamin Franklin, who did go to a Unitarian church and was sort of like, did believe in going to church, but was pretty Enlightenment-y. And John Adams,
pretty much a deist, right?
Pretty much a deist, but you should still go to church. Whereas
Right.
Thomas Jefferson didn't even really go to church or think that church was actually that important. He was so individualistic that he didn't have much role for an institution of religion. Whereas Benjamin Franklin did. And then John Adams was sort of more of a traditional or biblical, you could say, Unitarian, where he believed in the authority of Scripture and was sort of a Unitarian for those purposes. But this transmission of liberalism from Poland to England to the United States through Unitarianism is very important. And it was the experience of Unitarian persecution that caused them to believe in a liberal idea.
Right. Well, and that was obviously those are the guys, like all the states, like at the state level, you have much more like explicit Trinitarian Christians and that kind of stuff operating at the state level. So, but it would make sense because all the states were worried about the other states telling them what to do, especially like the smaller states. And so it would make sense that if they're like, okay, we need someone to draft the Constitution so that we could be a country, but also I'm not worried about these guys over here. It would make perfect sense to give it to a bunch of Unitarians because they're going to be the guys that are going to be like, I don't want anyone to have any power over here, right? I don't want to do whatever I want. Like, of course, they're going to be like, hey, Thomas Jefferson, you don't even go to church. Why don't you write this thing? It makes perfect sense that you would give it to those people in the same way that they wanted to punt on slavery. They wanted to punt on a lot of things because no one wanted the federal government coming in and telling their states what to do. At the local state and local levels, you had much more explicit, like in Charleston, actually, the churches here could fine you for doing yard work on a Sunday. Like the deacons could come around and actually write you a ticket and that kind of thing. Here, the Anglican bishop, like deacons, would come around and actually fine people for doing it. So but it would make sense that if you're worried about other states telling you what to do, and we're an Anglican colony and you're a New England Puritan colony and that kind of stuff, it makes perfect sense. Like, let's give it to the Unitarians and have them write
because they're a fair disinterested arbiter. But Unitarians were always
you're not disinterested though. You're not disinterested because you're worried about everyone else because you're the minority, right? You're not disinterested. You're very much interested in making sure no one can take control. Which makes perfect sense, right? That these would be the people that are the perfect ones to write this thing, or at least take the lead. And anyway, that's an aside. But yeah, no, I agree. I can barely listen to these guys about it. But
and what's funny is it's hard to listen to almost anyone today in the modern academy, right or left, because they're either their knowing knowledge of history or is truncated. I mean, the West has always been, when I say always, since Constantine, some form of Christian nationalism. Okay? And the United States is a form of Christian nationalism. I live in Wheaton. The guys who started Wheaton College, the Blanchards, were Christian nationalists. And I'd look at Russel Moore and say, you don't like their Christian nationalism? Because their Christian nationalism was, we need to get rid of slavery because God didn't intend man to enslave another man. We've read the scripture. Okay? Is that a good Christian nationalism? I would say that's a very good Christian nationalism. Is it a good Christian nationalism that we have civil rights, that Martin Luther King says we're putting down a promissory note on we're collecting the promissory note. Yep. The promise that was made 200 years ago, we're collecting on, right? And Martin Luther King used Christian images throughout his whole civil rights. He was calling white Christians, right, to live up to the scripture that they were reading but not living up to. So all of a sudden,
the original abolitionists, they were doing this for explicitly theological reasons.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, like, so you're saying, well, should you not do that? So, like, I sent you guys the podcast. It was called, like, Confronting Christian Nationalism or something like this. And there's this guy that you listen to it starting at, like, the first episode, like, at minute 21. He goes on this whole thing where he's saying, well, I don't want a theocracy and those kind of things. But then he goes on to say, so you shouldn't do things just because of your Christian faith or whatever. So if you need to come up with some secular argument for why if you think murder's wrong, it can't be because the Bible says it's wrong. You need some kind of secular, like, reason. And I'm like, are you listening to yourself right now? Of course, like, that's and this is where Tom Holland comes into the picture, right? Like,
yes.
Like, any secular argument that I would make would depend on a Christian idea and an ethic and values that we're all sharing, being part of the waters of the Western Christian world. Of course. So there is no purely secular, rational argument for me making these kind of things. And even your assumption that there is just shows that you don't understand that you are a Christian nationalist too.
Yes.
And that's what drives me crazy about this debate, because these people will say these kind of things. You're like, you don't even understand what you are. You don't understand why you think these things.
Right.
Like, why is murder wrong? Give me the purely secular, objective, scientific reason that murder is wrong. I dare you.
Right. Well, so that's the game on the left. Okay. And what's funny is, again, we'll go back to Lindsay. Lindsay looks at this stuff and he goes, you're all got a set of assumptions that you don't want to bring out to the light. Okay.
Yep.
And you're right about Wolfe. Wolfe is just hard to listen to. Okay. And what happens is Stephen Wolfe is way out there, and William Wolfe is sort of the guy that popularizes the stuff, okay? And William Wolfe is the soft Christian nationalist. Oh, no. But really, yes. Because if you were, when I say that strain of Christian nationalism, that strain of Christian nationalism that basically wants a true theocracy, they're not lying about it, okay? They want a theocracy. I've seen, A.D. Robles, who's one of the Christian nationalists, coming out. No, yeah, we get rid of mosques and Hindu areas of worship.
Right.
And it's like, hey, Robles.
Although, does he mention synagogues?
Well, some of them will.
Yeah, some of them will.
Some of them will. I don't know whether or not he specifically will, but, like, I've heard that where they're saying, yeah, you shouldn't have. If you want to worship and be like a Jew or a Muslim or a Hindu, you should worship privately in your own home. But like public displays of this religion should not be allowed.
Is that like there shouldn't be synagogues, or there shouldn't be a Hanukkah menorah in my public school during the holiday season?
No, they would. If you had a synagogue, it should not be displayed as such. So you should not have like
it should look like Willow Creek.
Yeah, it should not be like public displays of that religion. So you can have a building, but you can't. So like some of them actually make that argument.
Yeah. So one could argue that there's beneficial forms of Christian nationalism and Christian nationalism that is not beneficial. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so one could make an argument that with against the progressives, your form of Christian nationalism that anything goes doesn't work because it brings chaos and disorder to the society. Okay, we need to be LGBTQ affirming in our schools and just let it run rampant, right? Where most parents would say, nah, that's Missy, who's 7 years old, doesn't need to hear about gender fluidity. Okay,
or me as a Christian, if I'm an elected official, I should not be voting my conscience based on my religion, right? I need to separate it. So Joe Biden shouldn't like pass an abortion law banning it because he's a Catholic or something like that. Those kind of things. Like that argument doesn't hold water.
Yeah, that argument's pernicious.
Because what's that other thing that is giving them values that they're separating their Christian faith from?
Precisely.
Exactly.
They don't want to play. See, what happens is they don't want to play the game because Tom Holland comes aboard and says they would not like a guy like Tom Holland, because Tom Holland would say we see this with Sam Harris. Why has Sam Harris become now a joke? Yeah. Because he's been confronted so many times that he's only looking out of one eye, that even atheists are like, yeah, you know what, Sam's losing credence because Sam is coming out of one position. Okay, well, Sam's great line is it's clear to everyone. Really? It's clear to everyone? Okay. And then the form
of Kabul, see if it's clear.
Right. Yeah.
Like, come on, this is silly. And this is one of the things that I do, like not just Sam Harris, but like sometimes James Lindsay does this too, where he thinks like we're just going to go back to the Enlightenment and like the Enlightenment solves all these problems. And you're like, the Enlightenment is, really good ideas in the Enlightenment. Don't hate everything there, but it's a mile wide and an inch deep. It only works with an underlying substructure of Christianity, which is why you can't go to Baghdad and just give them Locke and have it work. That's not going to work. It's a silly notion. It is on an underlying substructure of Christianity. That's what it is, and it only works on top of that.
Yeah, and Lindsay's right that what's happening right now will eventually fall apart because it won't work. But what will come up from it won't be what he grew up with in the 90s. It just won't be. Okay. I think,
do these Christian nationalists ever talk about how implausible it is to imagine some obscure form of Presbyterianism taking over the entire country and it being
because
able to impose a theocracy with
they're obscure. They're obscurantists.
400,000 voting
all
members
these guys. All these guys go to very small churches. Right. Talk to themselves. Let's be clear. I'm not being mean. Or they live in Moscow, Idaho with Doug Wilson. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what you have is, think about most of those churches. They're not pluralistic by nature. Okay. When I say pluralistic, meaning diverse, right? You don't have, when I go to our Catholic Mass in Wheaton, Illinois, of all places, a lot of Filipinos, a lot of Hispanics, Indians, African Americans, right? You got cultures bumping up against each other. Okay. One of our priests is Kenyan. Another priest is Polish. And so you got all these things bumping up against each other. You have to find a way. Now, I would say, at least at our church, it's the common Catholic faith, right? But what do you do outside of church? What do we do when we are engaged in commerce? Or my daughter comes home with a Filipino boy and says, this is the man I'm marrying, right? Okay. Well, there has to be some kind of of yes, mile wide, inch deep belief that's informed by a deeper belief in what I would say is that each person is made in the image of God. At the end, once we have that belief that each person's an image bearer, then imperfectly Tripp and Sam and Hank may have disagreements on what that may look like, and we have conversations about it. But we have a basic agreement about that, yeah, that Filipino boy, Hank, you shouldn't be saying anything mean to because he's different than your daughter in the look of color and culture, right? Okay. And I think the thing is that the Christian nationalists have identified an issue, which is the Enlightenment is falling apart. We need to get rid of it and put back in this. And I would say you're putting in back something that systemically has never worked. It's like the communists saying, if communism was only done right, we'd be fine. And it's never going to work. And especially in a country like this isn't Guam.
Yeah.
This is the third largest country with population in the world?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, this is why, like, to Sam's point, this is why it's so implausible, is because there's such, even within Christianity, there's such a diversity of opinion, and we would not want, I don't want a Baptist running all the things. I don't want a Catholic running all the things. No one would want to, it's kind of like originally all the colonies did not want the federal government making all the rules. It's kind of that, we're not in broad enough agreement to have a theocracy about in any way, shape, or form. And that's why I think that you start to see some of these guys start to morph into white Christian nationalism, because then we can broadly coalesce around something. We're saying Christian, but really we mean white, right?
Yeah.
And then okay, I think that's where the imagination runs on both sides of where this is going, as being kind of a white nationalist takeover, and the real unifying variable is racism, as opposed to Christianity, because I think that of course we're going to make decisions that we think are good as Christians, in public policy. So anyway, I think that's what's going on, Sam. But I think it's a good point. There's not broad. I mean, how many churches? We're a Protestant nation largely. We break up all the time. Churches break up all the time because we can't agree on something. The idea that we're gonna, enact from the top down all these laws,
right?
And we're always yay.
And even Stephen Wolfe talking to Doug Wilson that I listened to, they're like, well, we mean sort of just like a broadly traditional pan-Protestant thing. It's okay, you guys are going to have no ability whatsoever to define what you mean by traditional Protestant. Mormons, okay, no, Mormons are out. Jehovah's Witnesses, out. Unitarians, out. Okay, what about the Episcopalians who ordain lesbians? Are they in or out? Because they believe in the Trinity, and no one could ever say that the Episcopalians weren't Traditional Protestants. But their beliefs are
Methodists.
Right. And so then
we have the Baptists, but then we have the Reformed Baptists, and then we have the Presbyterians, and we have the PCUSA, which is a liberal Presbyterian denomination, and we have the ARP, the PCA, and these other ones. You're we don't agree enough on how to even govern our own churches, and even the music we should listen to. The idea that we're going to all come together and be but we know every single law that should be passed and we're in lockstep on that is crazy. That's an absolutely crazy notion.
By the way, if Cale Zeldin was king, we'd have no denim.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. Where I side with Lindsay is we need some form of enlightenment, tolerance. What came from, as Sam described, the Unitarian tradition that Locke took and then the founding fathers ran with, and actually worked out fairly well for quite a while. But it's also going to have to be, and this is where Peterson has come in and others, right? You're going to have to acknowledge basic foundational Christian principles. You can't go somewhere else. And watching what Peterson did to Maher was just fun, because what's happening is, you know what, all their gods are dying. All of them. Their gods are dying right in front of them. Some know it. Many don't, but it's right there. And I think at the end, the guy who talked about this, and one of Tripp's favorite theologians, Augustine, talks about that, right? In the city of God. You have the God of the gate. You have the God of the cistern. You have this God. You got so many gods you have to worship. Aren't you tired yet? Because, man, it's tiring to worship all those gods. And I think with the wokeism, right, the gods of the pronouns, the gods of all that they have, and you're starting to see people who are saying, yeah, you know what, I can't do it anymore. How about this? How about if we go back to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Because that seems to work out pretty well. And yes, I'm going to have to tolerate
Ishmael and Jacob, and then and then you have the whole thing.
Right.
So,
but
I mean,
what it does is it creates a tolerance. I don't have to accept things, but I need to tolerate things, because theologically, I may not accept Unitarianism, but I certainly have to tolerate it and allow it to be in the marketplace of ideas. Now, there's an agreement that maybe some things should not be in the marketplace. And this is where basic Christian principles. No, you don't get to teach gender fluidity to a 5-year-old. That's basic, broad agreement. But based on something that's not scientific, okay? But based on something that's far deeper than that. And I think that my concern with the progressive Christian nationalism is nonsense. And the conservative or the reform or the crazy Wolfian view of Christian nationalism almost leads to a fascism.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in agreement. I think we're in agreement that the institution of the church needs to be separated from the institution of the government, right?
Correct.
So I think that the question for us, and maybe we could go around and just like give broad principles of what then is the role of a Christian who holds elected office. You guys have both held elected offices, or Sam, you're still holding an elected office. What is the role as a Christian and the faith? Because Christianity has never taught that you have to check your Christianity at the door if you're holding an elected office. If you're a king, if you're, an elected official, legislator, or something like that. No, like Christianity has never taught that you have to check that at the door. I think that we can broadly say we've learned through experience that the Pope being the one that sets all the rules, that ends badly. John Calvin being the one that sets all the rules, that ends badly. But like as a public official, Sam, what do you think your role is as a Christian, and what role does your theology?
I'm going to bug out for 2 minutes, okay, guys? Keep on going,
right.
But I got to bug out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, Tripp. Because, we can poke holes in the Christian nationalists all day long, but is there any sort of constructive alternative that we're proposing?
Right.
And I do sympathize with the idea that, basically most groups throughout history had a coherent religious identity. There is normally a relatively one-to-one mapping between a polity and its religion, and that's sort of part of the role of a religion, is to be sort of the social operating system,
or at least like an 80% with like a 20% that kind of like just goes along, right? That's tolerated, but just kind of like goes along with the program,
right? And I do fear that what Timothy Keller calls programmatic secularism is trying to set itself up as some form of theocracy, really, like an atheocracy or something like that, where what they thought that the progressive values become basically the religious dogmas or something like that. And so that I do think that it's difficult, and part of the reason why that idea is popular among progressives is the same reason that Christian nationalism is popular among the conservatives, is that there is some gut level human thing that kind of wants there to be, group level religious uniformity. And so I have respect for that, but I also
just to break in, there's a really interesting thing that Jonathan Haidt argues, is that actually like our sense of the sacred is the thing that allows us to cooperate at like large levels that other animals cannot do. So like a beehive can cooperate, an ant colony can cooperate, but essentially they're all siblings. They're all kin,
right. Yes.
Right. And so they're like evolutionary biology would reward that kind of cooperation. But we're cooperating across kin groups with people that are different than us and we're not related to, we're not necessarily sharing resources with. What allows us to do that is this sense of the sacred, something else that we're organizing around. And he's like, it could be a rock, it could be a sacred location, it could be Stonehenge, it could be religion, it could be a lot of things. Like we're kind of flexible in that way. But that thing is one of the roles that religion plays in a society. Sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to throw that out there for anyone who hasn't read Haidt. It's a really great point.
I agree, and I actually think that the religion or the political left in America does treat the American government as sacred in some ways.
Yeah.
And that the progressive left views the American legislative process as somehow the source of new progress that comes down from wherever progress comes from, and then gets instantiated, hopefully first in America. And America is the leading shining city on the hill. And then that spreads to our imitators and admirers throughout the world. But America has this special ordained relationship to the source of progress, and that it's our duty as an American country to be continuing to lead the world in that direction.
We're not colonialists, but we will withhold money from you if you don't have the right program around LGBT and you're in the Middle East or something like that. Like and so you're like, well, in what way are you not being a colonialist or an imperialist?
Yeah,
you absolutely
and so the political left, and it is still from it is a Puritan idea. It's a weird, mutated, slightly forgotten, slightly changed version of the Puritan idea that we're going to build a perfect society, and that it's America that has, sailed across the ocean and has this special dispensation and destiny from God to be the one that does this. Like Barack Obama believed that.
Yeah.
He really, really believed that. And like you can remove some of the Christian language around it and stuff like that. But most progressives on the political left still believe that America has the special role of instantiating the progress. Maybe they're a little bit more Hegelian in how they think about it than the Puritans were. Right. But it's still there. And that's why, like, when you see the meme of the liberal tears when Donald Trump's getting elected, it's the abomination that causes desolation. Right, because because it's the profane,
it's temple getting destroyed. Yes, exactly.
It's the profanity entering the sacred thing, and like we're going to lose our ordination from heaven to be the nation that's in charge of bringing the progress if we let orange bad people into the sacred place, and so we got to get them out of here so that we don't lose our relationship with the progress. Well, it's a religious narrative that binds, and like I'm joking and criticizing it, but also a lot of conservatives believe that too.
No, that's the weird thing about both the ardent anti-Christian nationalists and the Christian nationalists. They both kind of believe that, right? It's just a matter of which religion is going to be the one that we instantiate is the only real thing that we're talking about.
And what's funny is, I remember when Obama said that, the world is always progressing, right? History shows a progress. And my partner who went to Dartmouth, who was a history major, said, that's absolute bullshit. Yeah. He goes,
it's a divine myth.
After the fall of the Roman Empire, right? Yeah. I mean, basically, it took until the 1800s to have the infrastructure in Europe that they had under the Roman Empire.
But that's because they lost their relationship with the progress instantiation mechanism or something like that. But it is a religious myth, this idea that history bends towards progress, but we play a role, even though it's foreordained. You still need humans like actively engaging to make it happen. And it's not a complete straight line, right? It's a long arc, and it can go off track, but it'll get there eventually. And so we need to be the good people that are the ones that are leading the vanguard march towards it.
It's absolute. What you're seeing is a substantiation of Protestantism, right? That, if we could bring heaven down to earth, we're going to be good. And of course, maybe, hell came up. Okay. It's Reagan also had this belief. What did he have? Reagan was my favorite president, right? He would say, America is what? A shining city on a hill. Okay. Of course. I mean, we're the last and greatest hope. There's a belief even on the progressive left that we're the last and greatest hope, but for what most people would disagree with. Okay. And you certainly are now starting to see pushback from more of what I call traditional European countries like Poland and Hungary saying, what you have, we don't want. Okay.
Well, what I think is interesting is I think the American right is losing faith in that story faster than the American left is. I think the American left still actually believes in the superiority and special ordination of America to instantiate progress more than the conservatives do at this point. And I think Trump was really someone who, even though for all of his MAGA-ness, I don't think that Trump really believed in progress. And I don't think that he really believed in that story, because like George Bush and Barack Obama were pretty much on the same page about that sort of stuff. And they just maybe slightly disagreed about what the progress should look like. But like they were really pretty darn similar. And I think that this Christian nationalism that you see on the right is ironically a reaction that's starting to be like, I'm sick of this progress stuff. And I don't believe that story anymore. I don't believe that America is going to continue improving itself and improving itself as a nation.
There's a country music song that got popular by, I think, John Rich. It's like, you stick your progress where the sun don't shine. Like they don't, like they're now kind of coming out and saying it. Like they just don't believe in this. Like whatever progress, I don't want it. I'm not interested. And I think that they have lost that hope. And so now they're looking for something else. And so they're looking back with rose-colored glasses on what it was like before, we had this kind of enlightenment and before we had all this, and then they're looking back and you're like, do you understand that people are being burned at the stake? Like that's what was happening before all of this progress.
The Unitarians remember.
Yeah.
Just remember, the only problem with the Spanish Inquisition is we didn't get the job done. So I think here's the issue, right? Okay. So we could do a little history lesson in the last 30, 40 years. You've had there was a presidential candidate that said, when you do NAFTA, you're going to have a giant sucking sound out of the country, and you literally did. Okay. And we saw that even hasten with China. And so when we say progress, I think the better question is progress for whom? Okay. The three of us are college educated, white collar professionals. Yeah. My life is a heck of a lot better than my dad's life, who's an electrician. Okay. But I have friends who live in rural Tennessee, and their life is not as good as their dad's life. Right? So I could say, yeah, man, this progress is great. There's 25 great restaurants in Wheaton. There's wine, there's beer, there's all these things I can do. I can go to any golf course I want, right? All this stuff is there, like a big supermarket, a Costco. But then I talked to my friend Doug, who's my cousin, and one time about 10 years ago, somebody said, how do you make moonshine? And Doug came on right away and explained to him how you make moonshine, because he lives in far eastern Tennessee. You don't want to do this, you don't want to do that. He's that Trump supporter. Why is he saying it? He was a Marine. What do you do when you're from that part of the country? You know, you drive a truck or you go into the Marine Corps. Well, he did both. And so I understand his anger. His anger is, this doesn't help me. His kid died of fentanyl. He's raising the grandkids. Where's the progress? And what happens is instead, they're told by, you know, where David Brooks said maybe we're the bad guys. Yeah, they're told by David to sit down and shut up and like it. We'll give you a little more welfare. Well, that's not what they want. So when we talk about progress, that's not progress. And then when they're talked about progress, that, you know, they have white privilege by a black guy who's making $500,000 a year. That's absurd. I mean, why do you see the things we're seeing in churches? Paul Vanderklay saw this right away. The shepherds don't like the sheep. The highly educated shepherds don't like those smelly sheep that they have to. And what's funny is that unless you're part of the lives, I just finished reading about a priest who's from the United States who went to Guatemala. And what did he do? He was a farmer when he was in the United States in Oklahoma. He was farming with the people. He did the work of the people. They loved the Padre, right? Because he was of them. He understood them. He became like them to draw them away from and to God, right? To draw them to God. The problem is that Jesus understood who we were because he was a carpenter. He had to work hard. I'm just saying that there's such a disconnect between the leaders, which you didn't see. A lot of the people that were in leadership in our country 40, 50 years ago came from hardscrabble backgrounds. And they were not perfect men or women, but they had a background that could give them empathy for those people. And now my belief is Trump, I don't think Trump has any empathy for those people at all, but he knows how to say the right magic words.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a reason why it's like, especially, I mean, and it's hard for me to tell sometimes how popular the Christian nationalism debate is, because I'm very online, right? And so this is in a lot of ways a very online debate. And if I went into my church, I just polled people, most people would have no idea what we're even talking about, really. But I guess back to my original question is, so what would be like, what is the right way of thinking about being a Christian as an elected official? You're not beholden to an institution like the church, you know, officially in the sense that you're not getting your orders from your priest about how to vote on something or whatever. But what role does your faith? Well, yeah, maybe. I guess Hank would have to. Yeah, but what would be your how do you think about it, Sam?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think that the old-fashioned idea is still true, that everyone's supposed to be doing their best to form their individual consciences and shape their individual character and voting accordingly. And there's nothing wrong with me voting based off of my Christian beliefs when I'm trying to make some decision on the school board. But that doesn't mean that I want like the school to transform into some, you know, biblical Unitarian parochial school. Like, I have no desire. I have no thought that could ever happen, and B, I like wouldn't even want that. I appreciate that I live in a suburb that is, you know, like when Donald Trump's running, it's about 55 blue and 45 red. When, you know, George Bush is running, it's about 55 red and 45 blue. So it's a relatively split suburb, and, you know, can swing either way depending on the candidate. So like, I recognize that there are my neighbors that are going to fly the rainbow flags in June, and that they get to live here too, and that they get to feel like this community is theirs too. But they have to remember it's not just theirs. And so I think that I still really believe that the sort of liberal shape your own, like liberal in the old fashioned sense, shape your own conscience and vote accordingly, and, talk with and, converse and try and persuade the other people should work. But I should have no qualms about letting people know where I'm coming from and why I'm coming from that. And if Christian nationalism means we need to have more of our politicians who are Christian be less ashamed of their Christianity and be more vocal about it, fine. But like, who's against that at some level? I mean,
Right.
well, I know who's against that at some level, but like, everyone should realize that democracy means that people get to vote according to how they think they want to vote. That's what democracy is. That's what we're doing here. So I don't know. And the school board only has so much power. Most of the times we spend like voting on how much to spend on a new air conditioning unit. And I'm not sure how my Christianity focuses in on that, particularly all the time. But yeah, I don't know. I hope that answers.
Well, it does, in the sense that you're looking for the common good. Okay. I think that I know that's a catch-all term, but one of my mentors when I was elected was Henry Haidt. Henry was a great guy. He was a congressman out of the northwest suburbs, strong Catholic, but he was the guy that authored the Haidt Amendment in the 70s. And Henry understood the common good. And Henry did a good job of ticking off a lot of people who were pro-choice, didn't like him because of his abortion stance. People who were pro-guns didn't like him because he was for assault weapon ban. Okay. Henry's faith informed him on both issues. And he could defend that as saying, here's why I'm doing it and why it's for the common good. Right? So it's not just your faith informing what you're doing. How do you explain it in a way that helps draw people in? One of Henry's great lines to me when I was a politician, he said, Hank, if you hate the voters, they will hate you back. And what we're seeing today out of politicians is they literally hate the voters. And then they're shocked when the voters hate them back. And part of being a Christian means that I love voters who will never vote for me. What I mean love is I'm looking out for their good. Okay? Even though they won't vote for me. So, for example, I might vote for an assault weapon ban if I'm a congressman out of the northwest suburbs of Chicago. But some hardcore Democrats who, even though they like what I did, will say, I'll never vote for this guy anyways. I'm doing it for the common good, and if it happens to be beneficial to them, that's fine too. I'm not going to go out of my way to do something that's not beneficial to them. That's maybe a better way of saying how you should be a politician. No, vindictive at the end, when you are vindictive as a politician, it will come and visit you back. Okay, as a person, it will come and visit you back. The whole idea of forgiveness is, yes, I'm forgiving the person, but ultimately, it's a bigger benefit to me than the person I've forgiven. It's a bigger benefit to me.
Well, but it sounds like because when we say like even how do we define what the good is, right, is obviously informed by our faith, right?
Correct.
And so therefore, like this idea that I hear on the anti-Christian nationalist side, that your faith should be checked essentially at the door and should not be, and we need purely secular reasons. A, I don't think that that's possible. But then B, it wouldn't be a good idea even if you tried to do it. It's fine for a Christian to be Christian. But I would say part of being a Christian is respecting the other person's conscience and allowing them, like not forcing them to be Christian, allowing them to worship, even though you think that their religion is wrong and those kind of things. But at the same time, if you think abortion is actually murder, yeah, vote against abortion. Like you should absolutely do that, and you can do it for explicitly Christian reasons. And I think that I don't have any problem with that whatsoever. So that's like part of the Mott and Bailey that both sides play. Where if that's what you're suggesting, like no, I don't agree with that. But if you're on the other side, if you're suggesting yes, we have to ban synagogues from putting the Star of David out front, you're like no, that's not what. If that's what Christian nationalism is, I'm not interested in that either, right? So I think that's the problem, is that both sides are playing like a word game about what they mean. And it's only if you let them keep talking enough that they that you actually understand that, okay, their definition, their elevator pitch is much different than what they're actually advocating. So I think that's my take, is just, I'm fine with you stating why you're doing something. But, you know, and if that's because you're a Muslim and you think that this is what you should be doing, that's fine. And I can just not vote for you if I disagree. And that's fine too. So anyway.
No one likes a sneak.
Yeah.
Okay. No one likes a sneak. At the I think where our politics gets in trouble is when people run for office and then do things that they never said they were going to do. They never brought up. And people go, that's not what I voted for. Right. I think the at the end, you know, I'm going to be a little harsher on the right end of the Christian nationalism, because on the left end, I just basically, most of them are clownish. On both, well, I should say on both sides, right? But the danger of the right with the Christian nationalism is people are looking for order. And, you know, I mean, if you listen to Doug Wilson's a highly ordered person. He can be quite attractive at times. Okay. Yeah. But the world isn't ordered. It's like my wife gave me for our 33rd anniversary this weekend a little card that said Hank, ruler of the estate, right? And I typed out for her Kate, the ruler of Hank. Okay? Because if anybody thinks that Hank is ruling the estate as a tyrant, is absolutely out of their mind. Yeah. We are very complicated people. So if my relationship with my wife is complicated, how much more is our relationships as three people complicated? And then we exponentiate all this complication. So what we have to always look at is broad general principles that we can abide by, knowing that Sam may only like tea and hate coffee. Hank likes gin and tonic, and Tripp doesn't drink at all and wonders why Hank is drinking. Okay? But we all learn to work with each other. Especially tomorrow when it's 99 degrees, the gin and tonic's going to taste really good. But the idea is that in politics, we want more of a general principles, at least on how we treat each other, and then specifics on how we enact what we think is the good. And that's where you have the dialogue and the disagreement. The problem is that right now, what both sides think are the good are so crazy and out of whack, it's hard to have a conversation.
Yeah. I just at some level don't see any real plausible alternative to liberal democracy going forward, liberal constitutional democracy that protects people's freedoms. And I mean, I do think it'll be interesting as America continues to get more diverse and has more immigration from other parts of the world that are historically not the sources of where American immigration has come from in the past, that it will be interesting, it'll pose challenges. But honestly, to me, I don't see the threat to democracy coming from the Hindus or the Muslims or the Jews or the whoever's yet. I see much more of the threat to democracy coming from the institutional progressives who seem to want to basically have a theocracy of their own in disguise. And Vivek Ramaswamy, right? That I might not have said his name correctly, but he's an interesting guy, but he's trying to sound like a normal Republican, and he's a Hindu. And I think that the American system will be able to handle some amount of immigration from South Asia and Africa and other places like that and still hold. And if anything, I think that diversity of opinion does help prevent any one faction from becoming too dominant, and that's probably a good thing.
Right. No, this idea, the problem is that on the far right side, we can't pretend like the white, like the Christian nationalists pretend like the white Christian nationalists aren't there and making this argument, right? They are actually making this argument. However, the left is pretending like these people have institutional power that they just do not have, right? They're just not. They're not in charge of the universities or the corporations or the levers of power in the government or anything else like that. And there's really no danger of them ever being that because no one wants that.
Yeah,
and,
they're not even in charge of the Elks Club. Yeah.
No, they're not. They're running. They're like freelance authors and podcast guests. That's what they are. And so, I don't know. Like I think like one side is pretending like the other side, like these nuts on the other side, have way more power than they actually have, and the other side just doesn't want to admit that hey, like these guys are kind of crazy, and they are like actually arguing for something that we should just kick them out of our group and just say that's not what we believe. But they are articulate, and people are angry, and so people need a spokesperson, and that's so when they get a spokesperson, they go and get an articulate person, or they get a bully, and that's what's happening. Is that these guys are they're kind of co-opting like a different feeling, I think, in the country on the right side of the aisle that's real and in some sense warranted. But that's also like what they're trying to co-opt it and move it in a direction that I don't think that anyone really wants. So that's my take on it. But anyway, so I'm glad that last time we solved Calvinism and and now we've solved Christian nationalism. So I guess world peace is next.
Yeah. And one of these days that we'll have to get together about trying to solve Unitarianism.
Yeah.
Universally,
next time we got to solve Chicago's pizza problem because your deep dish is nonsense.
What are you talking about?
What?
Probably the most controversial thing I've ever said on this podcast.
What, pizza?
No, deep dish pizza. It's an abomination. And I was king, if Kale was king, he'd ban them. I would ban deep dish pizza.
Sir, I grew up on Lou Melinotti's pizza. I still have tears in my eyes when my dad in 1968 would take me to Elk Grove Village after a baseball game with all the boys, all the other 8-year-olds, and order 2 deep dish pizzas. I grew up on that.
You mean lasagna with bread?
Glorious. It's glorious. Instead of that, hold on. Let me have that thin. I want that real thin crust pizza that tastes like cardboard.
No.
Oh, hold on.
Neapolitan pizza. That's what
I'm sorry. Do they actually make pizza in the South?
Not good pizza. No.
No. See.
No.
So
I get my pizza from Naples, sir.
Tripp. When you come up and visit from Chicago, I'll take you to Lou's.
Okay. I'll just need a place to pass out afterwards from the food coma.
They have really good salad. Lou Maloney's actually is excellent Italian salad.
They have a fantastic salad, and then you get a picture of it used to be Bud Light, but now that won't happen anymore.
Pabst. We'll get some Pabst Blue.
Oh gosh, I love it. Hold on, hams.
Oh man,
I grew up on all that. I mean, it was all. Anyways, right. I won't go there. But
I should let you guys go.
This is far worse. Your opinion is far worse than your Calvinism.
All right. Well, it's good talking.
Before on the Calvinism, I'm like, I can let that go. But now we're going to have to put up
I had
gloves,
to make
my
that
friend.
Gig since you guys are both Chicago guys.
That's painful. Well, I appreciate it, guys, and
all right.
We'll have to do another topic. I thought this was really wonderful.
Yeah, this was good. All right.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye. Take care.